There are some cases that are so gruesome and terrifying they remain ingrained in our minds long after we've heard about them. And one such case is the Hinterkaifeck murders, also known as the horror farm murders. In this video, I want to take a deep dive into this horrible case, what happened, how it happened, and the theories surrounding this unsolved mystery. But first, if you're new here, please consider subscribing with notifications on. It would help a lot. Germany, year 1922. Andreas Gabbert and his wife, Cecilia, ran a small farm in Bavaria with their adult son Joseph and daughter Victoria and their respective spouses. They were a quiet, unassuming family who kept to themselves. Their farm was located deep in the countryside near a small village. For all accounts, they seemed happy, normal, and well-adjusted. For most of the year, life was peaceful. However, during the winter months, it got lonely. The cold weather kept most of the villagers indoors, meaning Andreas and his family saw hardly anyone. The nearest neighbor was over half a mile away. On March 31st, 1922, Andreas Gabbert was out chopping wood when he noticed a set of footprints in the snow leading up to the farmhouse. But there were no footprints leaving. He told his wife that someone had been walking around their yard, possibly trying to break in. He figured it must have been some young hooligans from the village looking to cause trouble. Still, he decided to keep an axe by the front door just in case. Over the next few days, Andreas mentioned to some other locals what had happened, noting that whoever was responsible for those footprints hadn't broken in only because he had scared them off. The villagers thought this was quite funny, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. Then on April 4th, Andreas went into the village to do some shopping. He let his neighbor know that he had left the axe by the door again, this time because he was going to be alone in the house. The neighbor said, "Don't worry, Mr. Gruber, I'll watch over you." And Gruber replied, "Oh, don't bother, I'm expecting company." When the neighbor returned later that evening, he noticed that all of the lights in the house were turned off and the curtains were drawn. He assumed the grubs were in bed, so he didn't think much of it. The next morning, though, when the neighbor went to check on them, he got worried. He tried knocking, but there was no reply. He looked through a window and saw that the door to the kitchen was wide open. And inside, he saw something horrific: the bodies of 6 people lying in the floor, hacked to death with an axe. He quickly ran to the village to raise the alarm. The police and a doctor arrived soon after. They identified the victims as Andreas and his wife Cecilia, along with their son Joseph, his wife Victoria, and 2 grandchildren. What made this discovery even more disturbing was that some of the victims had already started to decompose. They learned that the killings had likely taken place 3 days prior. A postmortem revealed that all 6 had been struck multiple times with an axe. The weapon used was large, with one side smooth and the other with a serrated edge. Some had defensive wounds, showing that they fought back against their attacker. The police also found that the killer had slept in one of the bedrooms and fed the livestock and eaten meals as if they were just out for a few days. There was no signs of struggle. Valuables were left behind, and nothing appeared to be stolen. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. But why? The police investigated everyone in the area, but no one came forward with any useful information. People reported seeing strange lights on the farm on the night of the murders, but nobody could say for sure what they were. And there was nothing to connect any particular person to the crime. One farmer did come forward and say that a few weeks before the murders, he saw 2 suspicious men looking around the Gruber farm. He had asked them what they were doing, but they replied, "None of your business," and walked away. But this was the only lead, and it led nowhere. To this day, it is unknown why the killer spared the children and then proceeded to kill the rest of the family. Was it a robbery that turned violent? Was it a love triangle? Had the murderer been living in the house and forced the family to leave before killing them? We may never know. I should note that there are many theories surrounding this case, but very little evidence to support any of them. So let me share with you what I think could have happened based on everything we know. First, I think the father knew something was going on at the house. Why else would he have kept an axe by the door? I don't think it was just because he was worried about protecting himself. I think he was worried about protecting his family. He knew something was wrong. He felt danger. He could sense it in his gut, and that's why he harmed himself. I also think that when he told the neighbor about the footprints, he was trying to hint at him that something was wrong. He was trying to get his attention. I think he was hoping that the neighbor would help him, or even just spend the night and basically be a human shield. When the neighbor said he would watch over him that night, I think he was overjoyed. Finally, he thought he would be safe. But then the neighbor backed out last minute, and that's when the tragedy unfolded. Whoever was responsible for this planned it carefully. They knew when the father was in town, and they knew when the neighbor would check in on them. They knew the routine of the household, and they used that knowledge to their advantage. I also think that the murderer had been living in the house for some time, possibly for months. This isn't the first time I've said this in any of my videos. It just seems like the best theory. Think about it. If the murderer didn't live in the house, how would they have known when the father went into town, or when the neighbor would come by? How would they have known when it was safe to strike? It doesn't make sense that someone would have known all of this unless they were living there. Maybe in the attic or a shed on the property. This explains why they left the valuables behind. They weren't trying to rob the house. They already owned the house. They had been living there all along. They were squatting, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Then when the coast was clear, they brought their axe down again and again and again. And then finally, when the job was done, they settled in for a few days, pretending to be the family, scaring off the livestock and eating their food until they were ready to go. As for who could have done such a thing, I don't know. Someone clearly had a bone to pick with this family, and that could have been anyone. In fact, this case remains unsolved, which means that it could have been anyone. Maybe the killer was never caught because they were actually the neighbor. Do you agree with my assessment? What do you think happened here? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This was truly a horrific and evil crime. And sadly, it's not the only crime like this in history. In fact, there were several other brutal axe murders in Germany around the same time. One theory is that these crimes were committed by the same person, a serial killer who lived in a small village and viciously murdered entire families before moving on to his next victim. There were at least 8 of these murders between 1918 and 1922, and each one was worse than the last. The motive for these murders varied, ranging from jealousy to insanity. One perpetrator was driven by jealousy after his wife left him for another man. Another was angry that a family had evicted him from his apartment. A third wanted revenge after being denied a loan by a wealthy landowner. Each of these men snapped and took their anger out on innocent people, hacking entire families to pieces with an axe. But while their motives differed, their methods were eerily similar, striking each family member multiple times with an axe until they were dead. These crimes shocked Germany and the world. Entire villages were terrorized by the thought that they might be next. And while the police eventually caught all of the perpetrators, the damage was already done. The scars of these crimes remained long after the blood had been cleaned up. Today, these cases serve as a reminder of the evil that can exist in the world and the lengths to which a jealous or angry person will go. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button.